The neon sign of the all-night diner flickered, casting a sickly, intermittent red glow across the rain-slicked asphalt of Route 66. It was 2:14 a.m. in desolate, unincorporated Arizona, the kind of place where the desert swallowed the horizon and time felt like it moved through molasses. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee, frying grease, and the faint, metallic tang of an impending thunderstorm. Marcus rubbed his bloodshot eyes, staring at the scarred Formica counter. He was an insomniac, a drifter who had spent the last 3 years running from a past he couldn't quite remember and a future he didn't care to see. The diner was empty, save for him, a trucker snoring softly in a corner booth, and Brenda, the graveyard shift waitress who looked like she'd been chained to the espresso machine since 1985. "You want a warm-up, hun?" Brenda's voice was like gravel scraping over tin. She stood, poised with a glass carafe, her eyes locked on the small, boxy television mounted above the pie display. Marcus pushed his mug forward. "Yeah, thanks." Brenda didn't move. She just kept staring at the screen. Marcus turned his head to follow her gaze. The late-night infomercial for a miracle blender had vanished, replaced by a stark, jarring screen of static. But it wasn't normal static. The black and white snow seemed to swirl, forming strange geometric patterns that pulsed with a hypnotic rhythm. And there was a sound, not the harsh hiss of dead air, but a low, resonant thrum, like a massive tuning fork vibrating deep within the earth. "Must be the storm knocking out the satellite," Marcus muttered, though the radar had shown clear skies just an hour ago. Brenda finally moved, but not to pour the coffee. She lowered the carafe to the counter with a heavy, deliberate clunk. "Do you hear that?" she whispered, her voice stripped of its usual gruffness. "The TV? Yeah, it's loud. Just turn it off." "Not the TV." Brenda stepped back, her eyes wide, staring at the front windows. Outside. Marcus listened. Beneath the drone of the air conditioner and the rhythmic hum of the neon sign, there was a new sound, a wet, tearing noise, like canvas ripping, followed by a sudden, terrifying rush of wind. It was accompanied by a smell, a sharp, acrid scent of ozone, like the air right after a lightning strike, but magnified 100 times. He slid off his stool, his boots hitting the checkered linoleum. He walked to the plate glass window and peered out into the darkness. The highway was empty. The gas pumps at the station across the street stood like lonely sentinels in the night. Everything looked normal, but the air felt impossibly heavy. The hairs on Marcus's arms stood on end, a prickling sensation dancing across his skin. Suddenly, the trucker in the corner booth stopped snoring. It wasn't a gradual wake-up. The sound just ceased, clipped off abruptly, as if a switch had been flipped. Marcus turned, expecting to see the man sitting up, perhaps annoyed by the strange noise. The booth was empty. Marcus blinked. He took a step toward the corner. "Hey, buddy," he called out. His voice sounded small, swallowed by the sudden, oppressive silence of the diner. He reached the booth. A half-eaten plate of eggs and hash browns sat on the table. A fork lay beside it, still slick with ketchup. But there was no trucker, no jacket, no duffel bag, just an empty vinyl seat. "Brenda," Marcus said, turning back toward the counter. "Where did the guy in the corner go? Did he go to the head?" There was no answer. "Brenda?" Marcus walked back to the counter. The coffee carafe was still sitting exactly where she had left it. A small pool of dark liquid was spreading across the Formica from the spout. But Brenda was gone. "This isn't funny," Marcus said to the empty room. He pushed through the swinging door into the kitchen. The fryers were bubbling. A row of tickets hung from the carousel. A radio on a high shelf was playing a faint country tune. But there were no cooks, no Brenda, no one. A cold dread began to coil in his gut. He pushed back out into the dining area and rushed to the front door. He shoved it open, the bell jingling merrily above his head, a sound that felt obscenely cheerful in the dead, heavy air of the parking lot. The trucker's rig was parked near the edge of the lot, a massive 18-wheeler. Its engine was idling, a low, steady rumble. The driver's side door was wide open, swaying gently in the hot desert breeze. Marcus jogged over, the ozone smell growing stronger, burning his nostrils. He climbed onto the running board and peered into the cab. The keys were in the ignition. A CB radio hissed with static. A thermos sat in the cup holder, steam rising faintly from the spout. The cab was empty. He jumped down, his heart hammering against his ribs. He spun around, looking down the long, black stretch of Route 66. Nothing. No taillights, no headlights. Just the oppressive darkness and the flickering neon sign of the diner. Then, his cell phone buzzed in his pocket. He yanked it out. It was an emergency alert, the kind that blared for flash floods or amber alerts, but the text on the screen made no sense. Emergency alert system. National incident in progress. Remain indoors. Do not look at the sky. Do not respond to voices. Seek immediate shelter. Marcus stared at the screen, the blue light reflecting in his terrified eyes. Do not look at the sky. Naturally, human instinct dictated that he immediately look up. The night sky above Arizona was usually a breathtaking canvas of a billion stars, a sprawling Milky Way that made you feel infinitely small. But tonight, there were no stars. The sky wasn't black. It was a deep, impossible shade of violet, swirling and shifting like oil on water. And in the center of it all, directly above the diner, was a fracture. It was the only way to describe it. A jagged line glowing with a fierce, blinding white light, like a crack in the very fabric of reality. It looked like the sky was a giant pane of glass that had just been struck by a hammer. The low thrumming sound he had heard inside the diner was coming from up there. It was deafening now, vibrating in his teeth, rattling the bones in his skull. Panic, raw and unfiltered, seized him. He ran back toward the diner, desperate for cover, desperate to get away from the impossible thing above him. He burst through the doors, the bell jingling again, and collapsed against the counter, gasping for air. He grabbed the diner's landline phone, his hands shaking violently. He dialed 911. The line clicked. 911, what is your emergency? The operator's voice was calm, professional. Listen to me, Marcus screamed into the receiver. Something is happening. I'm at the Starlight Diner on Route 66 outside of Kingman. People are gone. The waitress, a trucker, they just vanished. And the sky? God, the sky is cracking open. There was a pause on the other end. Then, the operator spoke again. But her voice had changed. The professional calm was gone, replaced by a trembling, breathless terror. They're gone here too, she whispered. Everyone in the dispatch center. I looked away for 1 second, and they were just dust. There's a shimmering in the air. Oh God, it's coming into the room. It looks like a shadow, but it's made of light. Get out of there, Marcus yelled. Run! It's too late, the operator sobbed. It's touching my arm. It doesn't hurt. It just feels cold. Tell my husband. Tell him. Her voice cut off. Not a scream, not a gasp, just a sudden, absolute cessation of sound, exactly like the trucker's snoring. Hello? Hello? Marcus slammed the phone against the receiver. He was entirely alone. For the next hour, Marcus stayed huddled behind the counter of the Starlight Diner, armed with a heavy cast iron skillet he'd taken from the kitchen. He watched the television. The bizarre static had been replaced by emergency broadcast feeds from major news networks. The scene was the same everywhere. An anchor in New York, his tie loosened, sweating profusely, reporting that Times Square had emptied in the span of 30 seconds. Surveillance footage showed thousands of people just blinking out of existence. One frame they were walking, laughing, taking photos. The next, they were gone. Clothes didn't drop to the ground. Phones didn't clatter on the pavement. They were just erased. In Chicago, a news helicopter filmed a massive pileup on the Dan Ryan Expressway, cars careening into each other as their drivers vanished from behind the wheel. The helicopter feed abruptly cut out when the pilot and cameraman presumably met the same fate. It was global. London, Tokyo, Paris. The numbers ticking on the bottom of the screen were incomprehensible. Millions, billions, vanishing into the violet ether. The newscasters tried to maintain order, bringing on scientists and military officials, but none of them had answers. Some called it a localized rapture, others a quantum event, a collapse of the false vacuum. But the truth was evident in the terrified eyes of every expert. Humanity was being harvested or deleted by a phenomenon they couldn't even begin to understand. Around 4 a.m., the broadcast from CNN finally failed. The anchorman had been speaking in a hushed, defeated tone when he simply stopped. He didn't vanish on camera. Instead, the screen froze, glitching violently, before dissolving back into that hypnotic, swirling geometric static. The power grid started failing shortly after. Without engineers to monitor them, without workers to maintain the balance, the grid was collapsing. The diner's lights flickered, dimmed, and died. The hum of the air conditioner faded into silence. The only light came from the eerie violet glow spilling through the plate glass windows from the cracked sky above. Marcus sat in the dark. The fear had burned itself out, replaced by a cold, hollow numbness. He was a survivor. But for what? To inherit an empty world? He needed a plan. Remaining in the diner was a death sentence, or worse, whatever had happened to the others. He needed to keep moving, to find someone, anyone, who was still left. He grabbed a flashlight from under the register, stuffed a few protein bars and water bottles into a plastic bag, and cautiously approached the front door. The air outside was still heavy with ozone, but the terrifying ripping sound had subsided, replaced by an eerie, total silence. No crickets, no wind, no distant hum of traffic. The world felt paused. He decided to take the trucker's rig. It had a full tank of diesel and a CB radio that might still be able to pick up scattered survivors. He climbed back into the cab, the violet light casting long, twisted shadows across the leather seats. He slammed the door shut, locking it, and grabbed the CB mic. Breaker, breaker. Is anyone out there? This is Marcus. I'm at the Starlight Diner on Route 66. Is anyone listening? He released the button. Static hissed back at him. He tried again. Look, I know things are bad, but if anyone is alive, please respond. We need to stick together. More static. Then a voice. It was faint, crackling through the interference, but it was human. I hear you, Marcus. This is Deputy Evans, Coconino County Sheriff's Office. Where are you exactly? Marcus felt a surge of hope, a desperate lifeline in the dark. Starlight Diner, about 20 miles west of Kingman. Are you okay? How many of you are left? Just me, the deputy's voice wavered. The whole station, gone. I was in the evidence locker in the basement. It's reinforced concrete, lead-lined. I think it protected me. When I came up, everyone was missing. The sky is wrong, Marcus. I know. I'm looking at it. I've got a rig. I can come to you. Where are you? Flagstaff, Evans replied. But you can't come here. The roads are blocked. Wrecks everywhere. And there's something else. What? What is it? The air, Evans said, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper. It's coalescing. The shimmering. I'm watching it on the traffic cams. It's not just a random vanishing anymore. They're hunting. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Hunting? What do you mean? The shimmering patches. They're moving with purpose. Sweeping down the streets. Like a searchlight, but made of distorted air. If it touches you, you're gone. I'm watching a patch move down Route 66 right now. It's heading west, toward you. Marcus stared out the windshield. The long, straight black ribbon of highway stretched into the darkness. Far in the distance, maybe a mile away, he saw it. It wasn't a light. It was a distortion, like a massive heat mirage rolling over the asphalt, warping the landscape behind it. It was moving fast, sweeping methodically from one side of the road to the other, a silent, invisible tide erasing everything in its path. It hit a stalled sedan on the shoulder. The car didn't explode or crumple. It simply ceased to exist, swallowed by the distortion. It's here, Marcus breathed into the mic. I see it. Run, Evans pleaded. Get off the road. Hide underground. Basement, root cellar, anything. The diner doesn't have a basement, Marcus said, panic rising again. He threw the rig into gear, his foot slamming the accelerator. The massive truck roared to life, lurching forward onto the highway, heading in the opposite direction, away from the approaching distortion. Marcus, the radio. The signals are attracting them. Evans's voice crackled frantically. The ham operators, the emergency broadcasts, the military frequencies. Every time someone broadcasts, the distortions converge on the signal. You have to turn it off. Marcus stared at the CB radio. If I turn it off, I lose you. You have to. They're drawn to the electromagnetic frequencies. It's how they're finding us. Turn it. Evans's voice didn't just cut out. It echoed. Turn it, turn it, turn it. The echo faded into a sickening squelch, followed by dead silence. Marcus knew what had happened. The distortion had found the concrete bunker. It had found Evans. With a trembling hand, Marcus reached out and ripped the CB radio's power cord from the dashboard. The cab plunged into silence, save for the roaring engine. He was driving blind into the violet-lit desert. He pushed the rig to 70, 80 miles an hour, the massive vehicle shuddering in the wind. The highway was a graveyard of abandoned vehicles. He swerved violently, clipping a minivan, sending sparks flying into the night. He didn't stop. He couldn't. He checked the rear-view mirror. The distortion was gaining. It wasn't constrained by physics or speed limits. It was a wave of erasure, moving smoothly and silently over the desert floor, swallowing cacti, road signs, and abandoned cars with equal indifference. He needed shelter. Not a building, not a car. Something deep, something insulated. His mind raced, scanning his memories of the area. He remembered a place he'd passed a few weeks ago. An old, abandoned silver mine carved into the side of the Black Mountains, about 5 miles off the main highway. The entrance was a narrow tunnel, bored straight into solid rock. If Evans was right, if thick earth and rock could block whatever frequency these things used to hunt, it was his only chance. He saw the dirt turnoff approaching. He yanked the steering wheel hard, the truck skidding dangerously, kicking up a massive plume of dust as it careened off the asphalt and onto the rugged desert trail. The rig wasn't meant for off-roading. The suspension groaned, the tires slipping on the loose rock, but he kept his foot buried on the gas. The violet sky seemed to pulse angrily above him, the massive crack widening, spilling more of that unnatural light onto the mountains ahead. He checked the mirror. The distortion had reached the turnoff. It paused, swirling rapidly, as if confused by the sudden change in his trajectory. Then, it elongated, stretching out like a grasping hand, and began to follow the dust trail. "Come on, come on," Marcus chanted, gripping the wheel until his knuckles were white. The mountain loomed ahead, a jagged silhouette against the glowing sky. He could see the dark maw of the mine entrance, boarded up with rotted timbers. He didn't slow down. He aimed the massive grill of the truck directly at the timbers. With a deafening crunch, the rig smashed through the barricade, plunging into the pitch-black tunnel. The headlights illuminated ancient wooden supports and sheer rock walls. He drove as deep as he dared until the tunnel narrowed and the truck's cab scraped against the stone. He slammed on the brakes, throwing the truck into park. He killed the engine. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, and suffocating. He grabbed his flashlight and the plastic bag, kicking his door open. He squeezed out of the cab, standing in the cramped, dusty space between the truck and the rock wall. He looked back toward the entrance. From deep within the tunnel, the entrance looked like a distant, violet-lit keyhole. He waited. He held his breath, listening for the tearing sound, waiting for the shimmering distortion to sweep into the tunnel and erase him. Minutes ticked by. The dust settled around him, coating his sweat-drenched skin. Nothing happened. The violet light at the entrance remained constant. No distortion entered. Marcus let out a long, shuddering breath, sliding down the side of the truck until he was sitting in the dirt. Evans had been right. The mountain, the rock, the depth it was shielding him, for now. He clicked off his flashlight to conserve the battery, plunging himself into total, oppressive darkness. He sat there for what felt like hours, alone with his thoughts and the erratic beating of his own heart. The reality of the situation began to crush him. He was alive, yes, but he was trapped in a collapsed mine in the middle of a desert, while the rest of humanity was being systematically wiped from existence by an unfathomable cosmic force. What were they? Aliens? Interdimensional beings? Or just an anomaly, a glitch in the universe's code, correcting an error called humanity? It didn't matter. The result was the same. Eventually, exhaustion overtook his terror. He pulled his knees to his chest, closed his eyes, and drifted into a fitful, nightmare-plagued sleep. He woke up with a start. The air in the tunnel had changed. It wasn't the ozone smell. It was a change in pressure. The heavy, dead air of the mine felt suddenly charged, alive with static electricity. The hairs on his arms stood up. He scrambled to his feet, fumbling for his flashlight. He clicked it on, sweeping the beam down the tunnel toward the entrance. The truck was still there. The rock walls were still there. But the entrance, the violet light, was gone. It had been replaced by a swirling, blinding white luminescence, and the silence had been broken. It wasn't the low thrumming anymore. It was a voice. It was echoing down the tunnel, distorted and metallic, but unmistakably human. It was a voice he hadn't heard in years. Marcus. He froze. The flashlight trembled in his grip. "Marcus, honey, are you down there?" It was his mother. His mother, who had died of cancer a decade ago. "No," Marcus whispered, taking a step back, bumping into the cold stone wall. "No, this isn't real. This is a trick, It's so cold out here, Marcus. The voice echoed, dripping with sorrow. Why did you run away? We're all waiting for you. Everyone is here. It doesn't hurt. It's just a transition. The shimmering distortion began to seep into the tunnel entrance. It was moving slowly, cautiously, testing the boundaries of the rock. It illuminated the dust particles in the air, making the tunnel look like it was filled with glittering snow. They're not gone, Marcus, his mother's voice pleaded. They're just elevated. We need you to complete the pattern. Don't hide in the dark. He remembered Evans's warning. Do not respond to voices. They weren't just erasing people. They were assimilating them, using their memories, their voices, as bait to lure out the survivors. Marcus turned off the flashlight. He backed up, pressing himself as deeply into the rock fissure as he could, praying the mountain was thick enough, praying the earth would hide him. The white light crept closer, illuminating the grille of the truck. The distortion touched the front bumper. The heavy steel didn't vanish instantly. It seemed to dissolve, breaking down into millions of glowing particles that floated upward and were absorbed into the shimmering mass. We can see your heat, Marcus, a new voice echoed. It was Brenda, the waitress. The rock is thick, but you're glowing like a beacon. Come out. The sky is so beautiful. They were adapting. They couldn't penetrate the rock with their frequencies, but they could sense him. The phenomenon wasn't a mindless wave. It was a conscious, predatory intelligence. The distortion moved past the hood of the truck, dissolving the engine block. The massive vehicle was being eaten away, inch by inch. Marcus closed his eyes. There was nowhere left to run. The tunnel was a dead end. He was trapped in the dark, waiting for the light to consume him. He thought about the trucker, about Brenda, about Evans in his concrete bunker. They hadn't felt any pain. They just ceased. Maybe it was a mercy. Maybe fighting it was the real torture. The white light grew blinding, seeping through his closed eyelids. The static charge in the air was so intense it felt like his skin was vibrating. There you are, his mother's voice whispered, not echoing down the tunnel, but directly in his ear. He didn't open his eyes. He didn't scream. He just took one final, deep breath of the stale, dusty air. He felt a sudden, freezing cold touch his shoulder. And then, the Starlight Diner, the collapsed mine, the violet sky, and Marcus himself were simply echo, echo, echo.